I think you're going to enjoy today's episode too, because we're speaking to Snow Patrol frontman Gary Lightbody. We spoke about music and mental health, but also about grief, the passing of his father, and how it inspired his new book, The Forest is the Path, which is also, of course, the same title of the album.
Snow Patrol was spent, with no hits and no success, and sleeping on friends' couches and going around in our Flintstones van that literally had a hole in the floor. Like playing to 20 people a night, and working in bars and just trying to figure out a way to have a life in music and it be sustainable. If that was my life in music, for me that would have been a success as a 16-year-old kid thinking about a life in music, being on the road, touring, going around different places, being in a gang in that way where you're just like, you feel like you've got each other's backs and it just feels like all you're living for is music. That's all I ever wanted.
Headliners with Nihal Arthanayake.
Welcome back, Gary. Welcome back to making music. Not that you ever stopped making music, presumably, but...
No, but thank you.
I love the fact that Fraser T Smith was part of this journey, because I kind of love his energy as a human being. I've never been in a studio with him, but the extension of him as a human being in a studio surrounded by you creatives, considering how much creatives he is. What was that like? What was it like to work with him? Because you'd worked with Jackknife Lee for so long. What was it like to be with Fraser T Smith producing?
Well, yes, we'd worked with Garrett at Jackknife Lee for 20 years, and to do with Garrett, that we just decided that it was maybe 20 years is time for a change. Garrett's a genius, and he's been amazing for us. And we just thought we'd never actually worked with anyone else, not really. Be nice to see what's kind of out there. We tried making the record in 2023. At the start of 2023, and it didn't quite work out with a different producer. And then we kind of were a bit lost at the end of that process. Sometimes these things just don't work. And I happened to bump into Fraser and wrote a few songs with him. Literally the first day that we got together to write, we wrote the song All. And as I walked into the room, I'd never met him before. And as I walked into the room, he was playing the chords. He was like, I've got these chords. And it wasn't like, hello, how you doing? Take your jacket off. He comes to me, he's like, I've got these chords. What do you think? And I was still had my jacket on when I wrote the melody. So we were just in, it wasn't, we've had lots of deep conversations, and Fraser's an absolutely lovely man. But there's many things I adore about him, but I think the thing that I probably adore most is that he's just, me, Johnny, and Nathan, and him kind of share that. Let's just make stuff. Let's go. Let's make stuff. Let's see what happens. And none kind of more typified by that moment in that first day. Literally the door hadn't closed yet, and I was being played a few chords. So it was kind of destined, really, from that moment that we would work with him. He's just such an absolutely delightful human being, so full of wonder and
curiosity,
exploration, curiosity, and also calm. He's very, very calm. Yeah. There's no panic. There's a great phrase in Ireland that we used to go down to Kilkenny quite a lot, and some friends of ours down there used to say, "Let there be no panic." And in fact, the phrase got shortened to "Let there be none," which is just glorious. I think Fraser is the living embodiment of that. There is no panic.
Was there any fear, or indeed, rather than putting words into your mouth, the idea of three of you being in a studio, not five of you being in a studio together?
Yeah, of course. We were a five-piece for a long, long time, and Johnny Quinn and Paul Wilson, Pablo, left the band before we made the album with Fraser. So we were going in as a three-piece for the first time in a long time. Our first album was made as a three-piece, so there was a little bit of symmetry to that. it wasn't something that we hadn't done before, I guess, is my point. But at the same time, it was very different from what we'd been doing for many, many years. And of course, we miss Johnny Quinn and Paul Wilson, a lot, and they're amazing people. But it's when people want to move on, and the remaining members, myself, Johnny McDade, and Nathan Connolly, want to continue as Snow Patrol, then your paths diverge, and the three of us were wanted to keep making music together, and we'll do until we don't. I can't imagine a world in which I don't want to make music with those two wonderful, wonderful human beings.
What are the laws of preserving a friendship, Gary, in the unnatural situation of being in a band with your friends? Why the laugh? Why the laugh?
No, I'm laughing because we are very, very close. Myself and Johnny and Nathan, we call each other brother. We are brothers. We communication. That's the thing. It does not endure if you can't talk to each other. And you don't have to talk to each other about every single thing that's on your mind. And we all, if there's something you don't want to talk about, you don't talk about it. But if there's something that's important to you in the context of the band, and you keep it to yourself, and you keep it to yourself, and you keep it, it will be like acid burning through the band. It's not sustainable. You have to be able to talk to each other about it, and we can. We've literally done it many, many times. Me, Johnny, and Nathan, just knocking on, one of us knocking on the other's hotel door at midnight or whatever, going, "Can I talk to you?" And it's that maintains maybe not every night. If you're knocking on the door at midnight, that's probably going to have the opposite effect. But you know what I mean? It's like the fact that you can do it, that it's a possibility, and it's a very open possibility that we can talk at any time, is something that really does mean that we can pretty much get through anything. You know what I mean? There might come a day when we just don't want to tour anymore, or we don't want to make records. As I say, I can't imagine it, but that on that day we'll be able to talk about it.
Does distance preserve it, or does proximity preserve it?
Oh yes, that's a really good question, Nihal. You're always really good, great questions. Both. I was writing the other day about the meaning of life, and what I came up with, and I'm no doubt wrong, but it's love in two directions, outwardly towards others and inwardly towards oneself. And I think that that's the same, that finding that balance in between those two things. It's not, if you get too much love out into the world and neglect yourself, you're going to end up suffering the consequences. If you give too much love to yourself, you're going to end up probably alone, and those will be the consequences. And I think distance and proximity is the same thing. You have to have both, and they have to be in balance. If you're always under each other's feet, it's going to, it's like a family, so it will eventually lead to, some kind of dysfunction. But if you're always away from each other, then there's not really much point in being in a band. But if you can find the balance between those two things, then I think there is that's where the kind of good stuff is. When every time you see each other, there's joy somewhere woven into that moment, and you've got the balance right.
Do you have to dance around the subject of saying, "I need time away from you guys"? Or do all three of you have to dance around it? Or can you say, "Guys, I need some time"?
All of us, and I think I know, I'm pretty certain that Johnny and Nathan won't mind me saying, all of us have said that at one point, or another. Absolutely. And it's not because we have suddenly fallen out of love with each other. It's because we need genuinely, you need time either to yourself or with your family, or to do other things. We all do other things. That's another thing that does keep a band together. It seems perhaps, that it would be anathema to it if you're off doing other things. But I think it actually helps. Obviously Johnny McDaid is one of the biggest songwriters and producers in the world, and he works with a lot of different people. Nathan has an incredible solo project and side project where he makes albums and is able to sort of explore music by himself, and as do I. I have side projects too, and then you kind of, when you come back together, it feels like an event, rather than, oh God, we got to just make another album, I guess. That there's no point in really doing it, especially after 30 years. There's no point in doing it if it feels like something that you're just contractually obliged to do, because we're not.
No. And as far as Snow Patrol and its success and its longevity has been, now you can look back on it as both a participant and a spectator in some ways because of the distance of time from when you first started. Has it fulfilled its promise?
Yes, is the short answer for me. Like as a 14-year-old listening, a 15-year-old listening to Nirvana, for the first time, and going to see Nirvana when I was 16 years old in Belfast, and watching that gig at the King's Hall, and realizing, I don't know how, but this is what I want to do with my life. This is my life was being played out in front of me. I don't mean by any means that I thought I was anywhere close to, and still would never even touch the feet of Kurt Cobain. But it was like he was doing the thing that I was like, I want to do that. What he's doing up there, I want to do it. I'll never do it as good as him, but I want to do it. And I was in that moment, in that gig. I knew that was the rest of my life. Whether I don't know how I was gonna do it. And the first 10 years of Snow Patrol was spent, with no hits and no success, and sleeping on friends' couches, and going around in our Flintstones van that literally had a hole in the floor, and like playing to 20 people a night, and getting working in bars and working call centers, and like just trying to figure out a way to have a life in music and it be sustainable. And if that was my life in music, for me, that would have been a success as a 16-year-old kid thinking about a life in music, being on the road, touring, going around different places, being in a gang in that way where you just like, you feel like you've got each other's backs, and it just feels like all you're living for is music. That's all I ever wanted. And for then to have a kind of a second act, as a successful second act of the band since 2004, and still 20 years after that, 30 years in total, being headlining festivals and playing arenas around Europe. We're just in the middle of an arena tour at the moment.
Amazing.
It doesn't make any sense to me, really.
Okay.
But it is everything and more that I could have ever wished for, and I do try and remind myself of that as much as possible, so that I don't ever go. Because I think there was moments in our life, especially like in the middle of the 6th US tour, on the Eyes Open album or whatever, and we were literally mad from touring. Like you forget just how privileged you are to be doing this, and I never want to feel like that again. I never want to forget that. So I think we all do our best to do that.
Did success ever turn you into a dick?
Yes. It wasn't really success. It was a level up. And I think it's always the danger. That's the danger zone. And, I'd say to bands that are kind of like getting to that next level, just watch, just look out, be aware, have awareness of your behavior, because you're not there yet, but you kind of think you are. And that's a really dangerous place. So we signed a big record deal to a major label after the 10 years of being on an indie label. The album came out. It was a big fanfare. This is back when journalists wrote nice reviews about us. All the reviews were really glowing. And then it was, we just thought, well, I thought we're the bee's knees. So, I on that tour, By the way, sorry, the album didn't do well. Final Straw did not do well when it first came out. It came out earlier in 2003, and it sold the same amount of records as our first two records, and we thought we were going to get dropped. So by the end of that year, we played a show in a daytime strip club to 7 people. And this was after Final Straw had come out. And I think I was angry. I was just angry. I thought it'd be different. Well, we signed a major deal. And I think I think I was short with people at times, and I wish I could go back and not tell that person that, you know, what's going to happen is going to be this or that, but just like, it's okay. Whatever is just, it just is. That's what it's meant to be. You know, just don't try and rush it. You know, I think I was trying to rush it, and now I know not to. So yeah, so I think in that maybe 4-month period, I probably had a short temper sometimes, and I wish I could go back and go, just calm down, son.
Did you work it out for yourself that you were being that guy, or did someone have to point it out to you?
Yeah, unfortunately, the latter.
Right.
Yeah. I got it pointed out to me, and when it was one thing I am good at is hearing somebody telling me something that might be like, you know, difficult to hear, but then being able to hear it without being defensive. I've always been pretty good at that. And it was embarrassing. And I was, you know, apologetic to the people I need to be apologetic to, as I always am. But, you know, in that case, usually if there's an apology to be made, I'm like, almost make it immediately. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Whereas, you know, 4 months later, I'm like, oh God, what did I say? But that's, you know, it's more about prickliness, I think, around that time than it was about. I wasn't about screaming arguments or anything like that. It was just prickly. And yeah, in that way, I was definitely a dick. Yeah.
So I listened to the album before reading the book, and it was interesting because listening to the album, one of the first words that came to my mind was regret. I just felt this.
You regret listening to it?
Well, that would be an awkward moment of honesty from the interviewer to the interviewee, wouldn't it? No, not in the slightest. Not in the slightest. Like, these lies made me cry. Okay, it was just such a beautiful, like, extraordinary. But this word jumped out to me. It's like, I can just hear regret, and I wonder what your relationship is like to that word, and then the emotions that flow from that word.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, this record was written about me at various stages of my life. You know, this isn't really a record about me now. My therapist once said that we all have the different ages of our life living inside our heads. At times we can be the petulant teenager. We can be, you know, like we can, you know, in my 20s, I was pretty much an alcoholic. And he's still in there, even though I'm sober. You know, sometimes I'll see, like, you know, I don't know, an episode of Mad Men will be on TV, and there'll be that clink of the whiskey glass, and I'm that 27-year-old in me is going, yeah, you know what would be good right now? A nice glass of whiskey. So I think that there's, you know, that this album was kind of that, like different sort of layers, like the strata of one's life. And yeah, I mean, of course, you know, the people that we have, you know, the relationships that haven't gone, you know, the way we hoped they would have gone in our lives, you know, that's, I mean, is that not almost every song that's ever been written on the planet? I think there's regret in every single album ever made, but yeah, I try to write about it in my own way, and just hope that I touch upon things that, you know, maybe resonate with people. But you know, I'm with Rick Rubin in that you make the album for yourself, and then that does the best service to the audience as well, because if you're trying guess what they want, it's actually kind of nobody really wins. So I kind of was just writing about the different phases of my life.
I thought you were quite withering in criticism of yourself and regret, certainly at the beginning of the book when you're talking about your father. That I thought was, as someone myself who lost my father, 25 years ago this year from a heart attack, I found that kind of how raw you were and how exposed you were to write that down. Quite extraordinary, actually, Gary.
I've been thinking about it for many years. I like since he died, which is five years ago, I guess. I knew I wanted to write about it. I just didn't know what exactly. And then the album is so funny because I was normally I write a song and it fits the song. I'm not like a Leonard Cohen style writer where I'll write 20, 25 or 50 verses and then use 5 of them. I'll write lyrics that will fit the song. But with this album, they just kept spilling over the sides. The lyrics just kept going and going. And I knew that there was something that it was trying to tell me. It's not that it's more than an album, because the album itself is everything it needs to be, and I'm so proud of it. But it felt like the lyrics wanted to exist in another kind of realm or medium, and I just sort of started writing, and it kind of just all kind of poured out. And there's a lot of unresolved stuff between me and my dad that we never talked about, and I felt like I was trying to tell him somehow,
yes.
Even though it's not possible.
No. So as a parent, I constantly kind of battle with this idea, am I being a good parent? But one thing that I guess when your parents are both alive, you don't really ever ask yourself is, am I a good son? Or was I a good son? What would your answer to that question be?
I think there's 2 answers coming up at me from 2 different voices in my head. I think about the times my dad was proud of me, seeing his face at the side of the stage at Ward Park 3, the gig that we played in my hometown. We played a series of gigs over the years in Ward Park, which is the park that my dad taught me how to play football in. And it was the last show he ever saw us do. And I wrote about it in the book. And I saw him start a stage, and he had the biggest smile on his face. And I can see him right now when I think about it. And yeah, I feel like a good son in that moment. I also think back to, and the book goes into this too, where there's so many arguments over the years. And this is a man I idolized in my youth and do still in my memory. I absolutely idolize him. But when I got to my teenage years, I started to rebel, as most people do. I mean, pretty much everybody does. And who are the people that we rebel against first? Of course, it's our parents, because they're the authority figures in our lives. So I was kicking against them, and my dad was always opinionated, and very conservative, and I saw the world almost diametrically opposite to him, like in almost every way. I just, he would, I was very liberal, he was very conservative, so our arguments were kind of legend really in our house, and my mum ended up most of the time sort of half referee, half crying at the dinner table, and it's I think back to those moments, and I don't feel like a good son. So they're two very distinct feelings when you ask that question. I think overall, probably I don't feel like a good son, because there were too many years I spent wasted arguing, which is why, I think that now, today, I have much more open mind. I have, most of my friends are liberal, but I have some conservative friends, and we have extraordinary conversations. And I think, I think
I probably couldn't have had that if I didn't have the kind of prickly aggro relationship with my dad, and then realized what a waste of time it was. And so that I'm now open to like having, you know, at least the possibility that, you know, I'm wrong about a whole bunch of things. My principles will never change, but my mind can change, and I change my mind every day about things whenever I feel like the new thing that I found out is a true thing. I'll change my mind, but I'll never change my principles. And I think that's the difference. Whereas with my dad, I was like determined never to have him win an argument until I was, you know, in my 30s. And what a waste of time that is, you know, what a waste of time. And I never apologized for it. Again, that's the sort of the thrust of the book, you know, and I wish I had it done. But by the time I was self-aware enough to realize that he was owed an apology, his dementia was too far gone.
I'm assuming, and please tell me if I'm wrong here, that your dad, certainly in the book, he comes across as quite an alpha male, and that generation, married to the fact that he's, you know, very sporty, he was a captain of all his sports teams at school, meant that, you know, him saying, "I love you, son," or "I adore you, son," or lots of hugs and kisses might not have been the norm, but please tell me if I was wrong. But there's this story in the book about when his dog died in the sand dunes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the most extraordinary examples of how a parent shows how much he or she loves their kids without saying anything. Can you just, for those people who haven't read the book yet, just tell us about the journey back home with his dog, one of his dogs who passed?
Yeah, Pip and Kim were the two. My dad was a dog trainer. That was his hobby, and he became very good at it. In fact, he became so good at it, he was asked to join the Ireland team. He didn't do that, but the wall in his office at home was just covered in rosettes, and the shelves were covered in trophies from the dogs, not from me. I never won any trophies. But the dogs were the superstars in our house. And Pip, usually Labradors. In fact, every other dog he had was a Labrador apart from Pip, who was a Springer Spaniel and was my sister and I's spirit animal as well as our actual pet. He was just the living embodiment of joy. We loved that dog so much, but we kind of ruined him because we'd throw tennis balls for him, and you're not really supposed to do that for a trained dog. But my dad, you hear my dad shouting from the back porch going, "Yo, ruin that bloody dog." I can still hear him shouting. But Pip loved it. He loved chasing tennis balls and loved having the crack with us. It was we had the best time with him. And then we went on. We always go on holiday in the caravan. That was our only ever holiday. Apart from one time we went to France. My dad would take the dogs for a walk, and he came back, but it was only there was only one dog with him. Him and I can remember it. I think I mentioned in the book. I can really remember my two parents talking outside the caravan. And it was like a different energy of conversation that I'd ever heard before, because it was death. It was the first death in the family, the first death that I remember in the family. And then my dad said, Pip's gone. We're like, we didn't understand. And he was like, my dad being my dad was just, he just wanted to bury him there because that's what he would do. That's what his father would do and his grandfather would have done. It's just what you do, I guess. But we wouldn't hear of it. We were like begging him, please don't bury him here. Please bring him home. And, we were only like 2 days into the holiday or whatever, there was another the rest of the 2 weeks to go. Finally sort of acquiesced, and then we put him in the boot of the car and he drove all the way home. and we buried him in the back garden. And I only found out years later that he spent that night weeping. I'd never really thought of my dad as crying, hardly at all. You know, just in his dementia, he would get quite emotional sometimes. But yeah, he didn't want to have to bring him home because he didn't want to deal with the emotion of it. But he did that for us. That's kind of how he showed up for us. There's always actions, not words. He never told me he loves me, but I know that he did because of the way he behaved.
How difficult was it for you, Gary, as someone whose job it is to convey emotion and story in the least possible amount of words, to then write a book whereby it's about, while not necessarily being the most amount of words, it's certainly not being sparing with words. How did you find that process?
It was challenging, to be honest. I didn't know that I could sit still long enough to write a book. I've got an awful lot of first chapters, I'll tell you that, under the bed. I had only ever written, 3, 4, 5 minute songs, and I guess I'm not going to elevate my lyrics to poetry, but it's not dissimilar to short poems or whatever. And it's a very different discipline to writing long form prose. Part of the roadblock for me was always sitting still. And all of the work that I've been doing over the last 8 years since I've been sober is kind of around two things: awareness and stillness. Just being able to be still is something that you kind of have to teach yourself in a way, and that can be through meditation or breathing or both, or many other things, I'm sure. But that's kind of how I've done it. And also going in the cold water every day kind of takes your mind, focuses your mind. That I don't think I would have been, well, I know that I wouldn't have been able to do it before because I've tried to do it before and I haven't been able to. So I think it was just a moment in my life where the lyrics were spilling out over the songs and I was able to sit still to write the book. And those two things kind of coalesced at the same time. And it was maybe just a timely endeavor.
Did you have to discover new ways of mining your soul in writing this book compared to songwriting? And were you prepared for what came out on that page?
No, yes and no. Yes, I was prepared in that. I have OCD. I'm sure there's people that are listening that have mental health issues, and I empathize with them. Mine takes the form of looping intrusive thoughts. So there isn't anything that I could possibly write or anything anyone could possibly write about me, like in a review or something like that, that I haven't said to myself and worse inside my own head. So nothing would be a surprise in that sense. There's no possible way that I could shock myself because I've spent so many years kind of screaming internally at myself. And that's another thing about the sort of finding the stillness and the awareness and also the kindness to oneself, that it's good to find that at some point in one's life. So I wasn't afraid of writing anything. I'm not afraid to explore anything that that has happened in my life, and I've been very open about everything in albums, mental health, and relationships. Although I'd never be specific about a relationship, but just the things that might happen and maybe the way that I have dealt with it, probably been the cause of every breakup that I've ever had has been me. So trying to deal with why that is and why I'm kind of dysfunctional in relationships. And I think those things are important to explore. So I wasn't afraid of something that I was going to, uncover. And I really kind of enjoyed writing the book, and I'm writing another one. So I obviously enjoyed the process enough to go around again.
You're in the middle of an arena tour, right? So you have the adulation of thousands of strangers, but that doesn't, as you have talked before about depression. That doesn't, and the interesting thing about that is, and I hope that attitude has left us now, what's he got to be depressed about? Right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I also understand how, and I think I talked about this at the start of the interview, and I hope I made it very clear. I do not take any of this for granted. Any of the success that we've had or continue to have, a 25th anniversary of a Good Friday Agreement event at the Seamus Heaney Centre at Queen's University with two of Seamus Heaney's children, grown adult children, in the room. It was one of the most extraordinary nights I've ever had, to be able to do that. But he said, not long before he passed away, and he was in his 70s, he said that he was still in his 70s figuring out what his poems were about. This is a Nobel laureate. And it's like, if a person of that level of genius is still figuring out what their work is, what kind of chance do I have?
Well, it's just a lesson in intellectual humility, isn't it? Which I think a lot of people in the world at the moment could do with. Quite frankly, that's the case. So look, I've taken up a lot of your time, but I've just got my last section of the Headliners podcast is always called the encore section, where I ask the same questions to whoever it was. First one is the last piece of music you listened to that made you cry.
I think it was, well, I know it was the last track. It's a spoken word track on the Lola Young record. This record isn't for you anyway.
Brilliant, isn't she?
And that record is my favorite record in a long time. I think it's absolute genius. And the spoken word bit at the end, oh my God. And the track before it, I think, Intrusive Thoughts, that those two sort of, if maybe I think they come as a 1-2 kind of punch, but there might be a song in between, but oh my God, unbelievable. But yes, I'm not ashamed to say I was weeping.
Wow. Have you ever heard her track Stream of Consciousness?
No, I don't think I have, but I'm writing it down.
Go and check that out. What Instagram reels do you regularly share with friends and family, if you do?
Oh, Garen music, Garen Noon. Do you know that guy?
No.
He's an Irish musician and comedian, and he's just hilarious. He's just absolutely hilarious. He's become a very big star over here. Like, he'd be on the Late Late Show and things like that. You know.
How do you spell Garen? How do you spell it?
Garen, Garron, but his name is Garen Noon, Noone, I think. And I just find him hilarious. So I will send. I've sent videos by him around a fair bit, but it's basically just him, shouting at stuff.
Love it. What genre of music do you dance most wildly to? I mean, Nirvana, right? Like, if
I have not danced in a while, I have to say. But
you have to dance.
Probably electronic music, Fortet.
Oh,
let's just say Fortet, because because I love something with great rhythm, but I also kind of like to be kind of like bamboozled. So,
well, I mean, that's Fortet in one sentence, right? Like, rhythm and bamboozle. I think that's definitely what he could call his side project. He's brilliant, Kieran. If trying to impress someone through food, what dish would you cook, Gary?
I make good comfort food. I'm not like a great chef or whatever, but I know my way around the kitchen. I'm pretty good. I didn't used to be, but I have been over the last sort of 15 years or so. But when I was at university, I dread to think. I mean, I couldn't even boil an egg, but I make a really pretty good spaghetti bolognese or carbonara. So Italian food, I think, probably would be the thing I would do if I was trying to impress someone. Carbonara, maybe.
Well, it's not easy, carbonara. Get, the egg and the parmesan and
It's
the cream.
it's a tricky one. You can get it. You can get it wildly wrong.
You can get it wildly wrong.
Yeah.
Wildly wrong. What are you a snob about, despite hating yourself for being a snob about it?
Oh yeah, this is one where you just have to be honest, isn't it?
Yes. Billy Porter was reality TV, and he was like, I don't care. It's like Real Housewives of I don't care. I'm not interested.
Yeah, I don't want to borrow from the great Billy Porter. But yeah, reality TV does kind of like that sort of reality. I don't get it. So yeah, maybe like.
So Real Housewives of Bangor.
That sort of thing. Real Housewives of
Bangor. Isn't going to happen.
Yes, it's probably not going to happen. Yeah, that sort of, that's not really any, I don't have any music snobbery at all. I love everything. And like, I'll go in depth. I'll go forensically into things. I'm really, trying to broaden my horizons even more now and listen to sort of more classical music as well, which I haven't, I don't really know very much about. I'm trying to get into that too, because there's so much amazing stuff.
Check out Ludovico Einaudi. He was a guest on my show last week.
Ludovico
Einaudi. So it's like contemporary classical music. Him and Max Richter. Max Richter.
Oh yes, I know Max Richter.
Oh my God, like that. That one from Arrival, which just makes me cry every time I hear it. Like those two guys are brilliant. But Ludovico Einaudi's like, I think he's great.
Yeah, do you know Carolyn Shaw?
Oh no, tell me.
Plan and Elevation, I think, is the name of the record. It's like she uses there's some beautiful arrangements, but she also uses the different parts of the instruments, like the cello, like hitting the cello and grabbing the piano strings. Ooh, and like she'll make noises. She'll make noises with the sort of the bodies of the instruments as well as the string, the bowed strings. So it's kind of
that's high risk, isn't it?
It is, but it's really effective.
You've got to really know your instrument to do that, I can imagine.
Yeah. And also, those things aren't cheap as well.
No, they didn't. No, that's true as well. Let's hope the streaming numbers are good on that. Just to keep her in pianos. Lastly, what was your dissertation on?
Oh, I didn't do a dissertation.
How did you get out? Wait a minute, you did philosophy.
I didn't do a master's.
No, but you could do a dissertation at undergrad. You didn't do an undergrad dissertation.
I didn't do an undergrad dissertation.
How did you get out of that?
Of course, there was no. I was in Scotland. It was an MA, Master's of Arts. I did coursework and exams. That was the only parts of it.
So no 10,000 word essay at all in your final year.
I didn't do honours because I failed my third year because we were away on tour so much. So I just came back and did my third year again. And if you do 3 years in Scotland, you can get an MA. If you do 4 years, you get an MA Hons. So I did. Was that being discharged without honour? I don't have any Hons.
A dishonourable discharge from the Scottish education system. Is how we describe your academic.
That's what I got. But they patted me on the head with that thing, and I got the piece of paper. So my mum and dad were happy.
Who was your philosopher? Who was the philosopher you came away from and went, that aligns most with how I see the world?
I don't think there was one that resonated fully.
Seamus Heaney, I guess.
Poets. Yeah, it was the poets really. I think that I think I wanted answers when I was that age. Philosophy was the wrong pursuit.
Yeah, because there are no answers.
There's no answers, and that's the thing. And now right. I know that, and I'm okay with that, and I also know that I'm wrong every day. And I wake up every day and I say, I know nothing. Please let the world teach me something. That is my mantra. I believe that fully. I completely understand that everything I know could be completely wrong. And I like that because it leaves everything open. Everything is possible. I'm not stuck in any places, and that works for me. I'm not saying that should work for anyone else. I'm not suggesting it for a way to live one's life. I'm just saying that works for me. I think at that time in my life, when I was, 18 going to university, I was 22 when I left.
I was so sure that I was right about a whole bunch of things. I mean, what the Dunning-Kruger effect or whatever, I was right at the top of that wave, of thinking I know everything. And one day, if you're lucky, you crash down to the trough of that wave and you realize you know nothing, and you can build your knowledge back up again. But I like to humble myself every day.
It's good. It's good.
I think it's a good start.
Well, that's why I love that you mentioned Carlo Rovelli in the book. So I've interviewed Carlo 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
In fact, about that book actually that you mentioned in the his other book about white holes is equally fascinating and bizarre. But a scientist once said to me, I'm acutely aware of the vastness of my ignorance.
Mm.
And that is a great place to start the day, being acutely aware of the vastness of your ignorance.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thought that I had a while back, which is like there's everybody knows something that you don't. And it could just, even if it's just the fact that if you can just let it be the fact that everyone has a different perspective from you. You can't see through anyone else's eyes. Everybody knows something that you do not. I would say they know more. Everybody knows at least way more things than I know. But let's just leave it at 1 because the numbers start to get pretty dizzying.
Mm.
There's 8 billion people on Earth. Now, that's 8 billion things you don't know. Now I add up all the things you do know.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it.
There is a towering pile of things beside a skyscraper that goes to Mars. Beside the 2 up, 2 down of our own, individual knowledge is. And that's, think about anybody with vast intellect. I don't have a vast intellect anyway, by any means. I've got small pieces of fragments of knowledge. But some, like even the smartest scientists in the world, the best scientists in the world are great because they keep interrogating their discoveries, the things that they, the ideas that they have, they spend the rest of their lives pulling them apart and letting, new information sort of flood them. And, if we keep asking questions, we might get an answer. But with that answer, we're going to get 10 more questions if we're asking it right. Every time I get an answer to a question, I go, oh, right, well, how does that equate to that? And how does that equate to this? A good metaphor, modern metaphor is, I guess, wormholing on YouTube. You've watched one video and you're like, okay, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And what about this? There's just an endless sea of information out there. I just find myself, completely humbled every day. And, I know that I know next to nothing, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay as long as I know that every day I'm going to spend trying to learn something. I think if I was okay with it, I was like, I don't care. I don't want to know new stuff. Then that would be different. But I want to know. I want to try and learn new things. It's just that every time I learn something new, I end up realizing that the thing that I've just learned is only the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I know. Listen, man,
that was a really long-winded thing there.
No,
I do apologize.
It wasn't at all. No, I'm just like I genuinely feel like I haven't been to work today. Like I've just sat with you and I feel like there's this kind of invisible cafe that we're in. Like I could do this all day, man, but I know time is precious. But Gary, thank you.
It was an absolute joy talking to you. It really was.
Oh man, brilliant. And thank you for the album. Thank you for the book. And I hope our paths cross at some point in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Take care, Gary.
Yeah, take care, Nihal.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day.
You too, mate. Bye.
See ya. Bye.
You know what? Conversation is my adrenaline. And to be able to have conversations as deep and as meaningful and as interesting as the one that I had with Gary Lightbody truly feels like a blessing. It's also a blessing that you choose to spend your valuable time with me listening to those conversations. But unfortunately, that's all for today. We'll have a brand new episode out this Wednesday. As always, I'd love to know what you think of all the episodes and perhaps some suggestions of who you'd like to hear me in conversation with. All you have to do is email nihal@bbc.co.uk. Thanks for listening. Make sure you're subscribed to Headliners on your favourite podcast platforms, and I'll see you soon.